In the year 747 AD, a man sitting in a dusty village in eastern Persia unrolled a small piece of parchment. He read it. Then he picked up a black cloth banner, walked outside, and raised it into the sky. Within 3 years, the largest empire on earth had collapsed. Not because of war, not because of plague, not because of famine, because of that letter. The Umayyad Caliphate controlled 11 million square kilometers of territory. It stretched from the shores of the Atlantic Ocean in Spain all the way to the mountains of Central Asia. No empire in the world could match it. They had armies of hundreds of thousands. They had gold flowing in from 3 continents. Their caliph sat on a throne in Damascus and issued commands that echoed across the known world. And they lost everything because of a piece of paper. Here is the full story of the Abbasid Revolution, the most successful underground conspiracy in medieval history, organized almost entirely through secret letters, and the remarkable chain of events that brought the mightiest empire of its era crashing to the ground. To understand why the Umayyads fell, we have to understand what they built and what they destroyed along the way. The Umayyad dynasty came to power in 661 AD after the first great civil war in Islamic history. Their founder, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, was a political genius. He moved the capital from Medina to Damascus, turned the caliphate into a dynastic monarchy, and built the first true Islamic empire. Under the Umayyads, the Islamic world expanded at a breathtaking pace. Arab armies swept west across North Africa, crossed the Strait of Gibraltar in 711 AD, and conquered most of Spain and Portugal in less than 7 years. Simultaneously, they pushed east through Persia, Central Asia, and into northwestern India. It was the fastest territorial expansion in the history of the ancient world. But there was a fatal contradiction at the heart of the Umayyad project. Islam preached the absolute equality of all believers before God. The Prophet Muhammad had explicitly said that no Arab was superior to a non-Arab except through piety. Yet the Umayyad government operated as an Arab supremacist state. Non-Arab Muslims, Persians, Berbers, Turks, and others were called mawali, clients or freed persons. They were treated as second-class citizens even after converting to Islam. The mawali paid extra taxes that Arab Muslims did not pay. They could not hold high military command. They were excluded from the pension registers that gave Arab warriors their income. A Persian who converted to Islam and fought in the Umayyad army would never be promoted above a certain rank because he was not Arab. This was not just insulting. It was economically devastating for millions of people, and it produced a fury that would simmer for decades. The region that felt this injustice most acutely was Khurasan, a vast territory covering modern-day Iran, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Khurasan was the easternmost province of the empire. Its population was overwhelmingly Persian and Central Asian. They had converted to Islam in enormous numbers. They were educated, numerous, and furious. They were the perfect fuel for a revolution. Someone just needed to light the match. The family that would light that match lived in a small town called Humayma in the desert of modern Jordan. They were descendants of Al-Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad. They called themselves the Abbasids. They had no army, no treasury, no official power whatsoever. What they had was legitimacy, a bloodline connection to the Prophet, and a plan 30 years in the making. Around 718 AD, the Abbasid family quietly began building what historians call the Dawah, the call. It was a secret underground network of agents, preachers, and organizers who traveled through Khurasan disguised as merchants and pilgrims. They recruited in mosques, in village squares, in private homes at night. Their message was simple: the Umayyads are corrupt and unjust. The true caliphate belongs to the family of the Prophet. Join us, and equality will be restored. The entire operation ran on letters. The Abbasid Imam, the hidden leader of the movement, communicated with his network through sealed scrolls passed by trusted couriers along the trade routes. Agents reported back through the same system. There were no meetings where the whole network could be exposed at once. It was a postal conspiracy, patient and methodical, invisible to the Umayyad intelligence services for 3 decades. The man chosen to lead the Dawah network in Khurasan was named Abu Muslim. His origins are somewhat mysterious. He may have been a freed Persian slave or a man of mixed Central Asian heritage. What is clear is that he arrived in Khurasan around 745 AD as the personal representative of the Abbasid Imam. He was young, intelligent, utterly ruthless when needed, and completely devoted to the cause. He was the right man for the moment. By 745 AD, the Abbasid network in Khurasan had grown massive. Tens of thousands of people were secretly pledged to the revolution, but the uprising was still waiting for a signal, a formal authorization from the Abbasid Imam. The Imam at this time was Ibrahim ibn Muhammad, living in Humayma under Umayyad surveillance, carefully hidden from view. He was watching the Umayyad Caliphate tear itself apart, because the Umayyad Caliphate by the mid-740s was in spectacular internal crisis. The ruling class had split into two bitterly hostile Arab tribal blocs, the Qaysi tribes of northern Arabia and the Yamani tribes of southern Arabia. They hated each other with a ferocity that made governing almost impossible. From Spain to Syria to Khurasan itself, Qaysi and Yamani factions were fighting each other instead of defending the empire. The Caliph in Damascus was watching his provinces fall into open tribal warfare. The last Umayyad Caliph, Marwan II, had come to power in 744 AD after 2 years of near-constant civil war that had killed 3 caliphs in rapid succession. Marwan was actually a capable military commander, a tough, experienced general who had spent years fighting on the Byzantine frontier, but he had inherited a caliphate that was already fracturing. He immediately faced revolts in Iraq, Syria, and elsewhere. His armies were exhausted from fighting each other. Ibrahim ibn Muhammad, watching all of this from Humayma, made his decision. The moment had come. In early 747 AD, he wrote the letter that would change history. He addressed it to Abu Muslim in Khurasan. It was a commission, a formal written authorization granting Abu Muslim the authority to begin the open uprising in Khurasan in the name of the Abbasid family. Along with the letter, he sent a black banner, the symbol of the Abbasids, the color of mourning and revolution. The letter traveled thousands of kilometers through the desert and the mountains, passed from courier to courier along the Dawah network, each carrier knowing only the next stop. When it finally reached Abu Muslim in Merv, the great city at the heart of Khurasan, he read it, rolled it back up, and began to act. On the 9th of June, 747 AD, in a small village called Sisfajan, Abu Muslim unfurled the black banner. The revolution had begun. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People had been waiting for this signal for years. Thousands flocked to the black banner within days. Men who had secretly pledged to the Dawah network came forward publicly for the first time. Former soldiers, merchants, farmers, village chiefs. The entire underground network surfaced at once. Abu Muslim suddenly commanded an army where before he had commanded only a network of couriers. The Umayyad governor of Khurasan, an elderly Arab official named Nasr ibn Sayyar, immediately understood what was happening. He was not a foolish man. He sent urgent letters to Caliph Marwan II in Damascus, describing the uprising in the most alarming terms. He even composed a famous poem that he included in his dispatch. I see embers glowing beneath the ash, about to blaze when someone fans the flame. Fire starts from the striking of flint and steel, and wars begin with words. He was begging for help. Marwan II's response was inadequate and slow. He was simultaneously suppressing revolts in Iraq and Syria and could not spare enough forces for a distant eastern province. He sent some reinforcements, but nowhere near enough. Meanwhile, the Qaysi and Yamani factions in Khurasan itself were still fighting each other instead of uniting against Abu Muslim. Nasr ibn Sayyar wrote letter after letter to Damascus, each more desperate than the last. They were ignored, or arrived too late. Within months, Abu Muslim had conquered all of Khurasan. City after city either fell to his forces or opened its gates willingly. The local Persian and Central Asian population overwhelmingly supported the revolution. Nasr ibn Sayyar fled westward ahead of the advancing black banners, an old man watching everything he had governed crumble. He would die as a refugee before the revolution was even half complete. Khurasan, the largest and wealthiest eastern province, was gone. Then came a twist that could have ended the revolution before it reached the center of the empire. Marwan II's intelligence agents tracked down Ibrahim ibn Muhammad, the Abbasid Imam who had sent the original letter, at his home in Humayma. Ibrahim was arrested and transported to a prison in Haran in northern Syria. Within weeks, he was dead, executed on Marwan's orders. The man who had written the letter that started everything would never see its result. But Ibrahim had anticipated this possibility. Before his arrest, he had passed the leadership of the Abbasid movement to his brother, Abu al-Abbas, and crucially, the revolution no longer needed its founder. The letter had already done its work. The network was already active. The army was already in the field. The movement was self-sustaining. Ibrahim's death barely slowed it down. Through 748 and 749 AD, Abu Muslim's forces swept westward across Persia, the old Sasanian heartland. The cities of Isfahan, Nihawand, and finally the twin cities of Al-Madan on the Tigris River fell one by one. Umayyad forces fought back in several battles but could not stop the advance. Local populations often switched sides or simply melted away rather than fight for the Umayyads. The Black Banner kept moving west. In November 749 AD, the Abbasids publicly proclaimed their new caliph in the Great Mosque of Kufa in Iraq. Abu al-Abbas, Ibrahim's surviving brother, was declared the first Abbasid caliph. He gave a speech that was notably direct about what was coming. He called himself Al-Safa, the bloodshedder. He was not hiding what the Abbasids intended to do to the Umayyad family. The massacres he promised would come soon enough. Marwan II gathered his remaining forces, still a substantial army, for one final confrontation. He could not surrender. He knew what the Abbasids intended for his family. In January 750 AD, the two armies met at the Battle of the Zab, along a tributary of the Tigris River in what is now northern Iraq and Kurdistan. It was to be the decisive battle of the revolution. The fate of the largest empire in the world would be settled on this riverbank. The battle lasted several days. Marwan's forces initially held their positions, but the Abbasid army had something the Umayyads lacked: unity of purpose. The Abbasid soldiers were fighting for a cause: equality, justice, and the right leadership of the Islamic community. The Umayyad army was fighting for a dynasty that many of its own soldiers had already lost faith in. At a critical moment, Marwan's line broke. The Umayyad army collapsed in a catastrophic rout. Marwan II fled. He ran from the battlefield. He ran from Mosul to Syria. He ran from Syria to Palestine. He ran from Palestine to Egypt, each desperate move buying him only a few more months of life. Behind him, the Abbasid forces swept through the Umayyad heartlands: Syria, the Levant, Arabia, meeting almost no real resistance. The empire that had stood for 90 years was dissolving as rapidly as snow in spring rain. In August 750 AD, Marwan II was cornered near the Egyptian village of Abu Sur. His pursuers caught him inside a small church where he had taken shelter. He was killed there. The last Umayyad caliph, the last ruler of the largest empire on earth, dying in a mud-brick church in the Egyptian countryside. His head was cut off and sent to the new Abbasid caliph. After 90 years, the Umayyad Caliphate was over. What followed was one of history's most thorough political exterminations. The Abbasids hunted down virtually every surviving member of the Umayyad family. Some were killed in battle. Some were executed individually. Many were killed at a famous reconciliation banquet where Abbasid agents invited surviving Umayyad princes under promise of safe conduct, then massacred them at the table. Leather mats were placed over the dying so that the victors could continue eating. It was deliberate. It was calculated. It was total. One Umayyad prince escaped. His name was Abd al-Rahman, the grandson of the great Caliph Hisham. He was 19 years old when the Abbasids came for his family. He ran. He ran across Palestine, across the Sinai, across North Africa. 3,000 kilometers of running from an empire that wanted him dead. He had nothing but a horse, a few loyal companions, and his lineage. In 756 AD, he crossed the Strait of Gibraltar into Spain and founded the Emirate of Cordoba, the last surviving piece of Umayyad power on earth. The Abbasid Caliphate immediately began transforming everything. The capital was moved from Damascus to Iraq. In 762 AD, the second Abbasid Caliph, Al-Mansur, built an entirely new city from scratch on the western bank of the Tigris River. He called it Madinat al-Salam, the City of Peace. We know it today as Baghdad. The city was designed as a perfect circle, the Caliph's palace at the center, 4 gates pointing to the 4 corners of the world. It was the statement of a new era. Under the Abbasids, the Islamic world was genuinely transformed. Non-Arab Muslims were admitted to positions of power for the first time. Persian administrators, scholars, and military commanders rose to the highest ranks of government. The tax inequalities were abolished. Khurasan, the heartland of the revolution, became one of the most culturally influential regions in the empire rather than the most resentful. The promise of the letter had been kept. Partially, at least. The Abbasid Golden Age produced some of the most remarkable intellectual achievements in human history. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad translated every Greek philosophical and scientific text it could find into Arabic, preserving works that would otherwise have been lost forever. Persian, Greek, Indian, and Egyptian knowledge converged in Baghdad and was synthesized into advances in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. The algebra we still use today was developed in this era. But there was a tragic footnote to the revolution's most important man, Abu Muslim, the general who had received the original letter, who had raised the black standard, who had won every battle, who had made the Abbasid Caliphate possible, was executed by the second Abbasid Caliph, al-Mansur, in 754 AD. Al-Mansur feared Abu Muslim's popularity and power in Khurasan. He lured him to a meeting and had him killed. The man who created the empire was murdered by the empire he created. The death of Abu Muslim was not forgotten. For centuries afterward, movements in Khurasan and Persia would invoke his name, claiming he had not really died, that he would return, that the revolution was not finished. Multiple rebellions were launched in his name over the following decades. He became a kind of martyred folk hero. The man who had changed the world, betrayed by the power he helped create. The revolution had devoured the man who wrote the letter, and then devoured the man who acted on it. What made the Abbasid Revolution so historically unique was its method. Almost every great empire in history had been conquered by an army that was visible from the start. The Abbasid Revolution did the opposite. It built its army in secret through a written correspondence network that operated for 30 years without being detected. When the letter finally arrived and Abu Muslim raised the black standard, the Umayyads were already surrounded. They just did not know it yet. The story also reveals a fundamental truth about large empires. They are destroyed from within more often than from without. The Umayyad Caliphate was not conquered by a foreign power. No Byzantine army marched in. No Frankish king invaded. The empire was unraveled by its own internal contradictions, by the gap between what it promised its subjects and what it actually delivered. The Abbasid letter was just the spark. The fuel had been accumulating for decades. Consider what the Abbasids actually had when Ibrahim wrote that letter. A small family hiding in a desert town, a network of underground agents communicating by sealed scrolls, and a message that resonated with millions of people who had been told they were equal but treated as inferiors. The Umayyads had gold, armies, palaces, and a century of accumulated power. And yet it was the letter, not the armies, that ultimately proved stronger. Ideas, written down, copied, passed from hand to hand, can outlast any empire. The largest empire in the world in the year 720 AD no longer existed by 750 AD. It had taken 30 years of patient letter writing to build the movement that destroyed it, and less than 3 years of open warfare to finish the job. Ibrahim ibn Muhammad never saw his revolution succeed. He was killed in prison before the battle was won. Abu Muslim never enjoyed the peace he helped create. He was executed by the rulers he put in power. But the black banner rose. The letter was delivered, and the world was never the same.